Rami Kimhi, Dr. Rami Kimhi, a film professor, he made a film about Operation Torch in Algeria, where Jose Albuquerque was one of the leaders, okay? Now, Rami, I wanted him to do a film presentation, but it's not gonna happen. Rami changed his topic, but first I'm gonna read Rami's, his intro, okay? And then I'll give you another, it just jumped on me. Oh, yeah. Okay, Rami Kimhi is an Israeli culture critic and filmmaker. He received his PhD in Near Eastern Studies from the University of Michigan. He's an associate professor at Ariel University in Israel in the School of Communications. He published many articles and 2 books, one of them, The Israeli Shtetls, Boreka Films and Yiddish Literature, 2012 by Resling. It's also about to be published in the United States by the University of Indiana Press. Kimhi was the winner of the Dov Sedan Prize for Hebrew Literature. Apart from being a scholar in the field of contemporary Israeli culture, Kimhi is a prominent Israeli filmmaker. Kimhi won international prizes for his film Dalia's Wedding at the International Film Festival in Jerusalem for Best Fiction and the Munich International Film Festival Best Program. His last film, The Night of Fools, won the Israeli Ministry of Culture Prize in 2015. Now, Rami, he's not going to talk about film. Instead, he's going to talk about the relation between Yitzhak Goren Gormajano, who's an author who wrote about his childhood in Alexandria and has a whole series of over 20 books of Sephardic authors, many unknown. And Rami is going to compare Goren Gormazano with the Spanish author Rojas. So without any further ado, Rami.
Thank you, my friend, for this lovely presentation, and good afternoon to all the Americans. Good night to all the Israelis. Here in Israel, it's 11 p.m., so it's a very difficult time for an academic lecture, but I guess we will make it. I would like to dedicate this lecture to the Alexandrian trilogy by the Israeli author of Sephardic origin, Yitzhak Gormezano Goren, and to its sources in the 15th and 16th century Marrano literature in Spain. The first novel in the trilogy, Alexandrian Summer, was published in 1978 and in English in America in 2016. The second, Blanche, in 1986, and the third, Alexandrian Shores, came out in 2018. Hegemonic modern Hebrew literature is modernistic. In contrast, the literature of Alexandrian-born Gormezano Goren offers a postmodernist view founded on skepticism and irony, as well as on reassessment of the values that modernism promoted. But its most important postmodernist aspect is that of completely ignoring the concept of the nation, while highlighting the absolute value of the personal and family memory, the memory of the ethnic group. So Gormezano Goren's work in the Alexandrian trilogy is quite unique in the panorama of Hebrew literature and has no sources in earlier hegemonic texts. But since I believe that such a mature writing does not appear out of nowhere, this begs a question of where should we look for the sources of the trilogy. Elsewhere, I have already shown that the sources of the Borekas films, the only original genre of Israeli cinema, lie in classic Yiddish literature and its presentations of the shtetls. The authors of Boreka's films were Ashkenazim from Yiddish-speaking families. Itzhak Goren is a Sfaradi from a Ladino-speaking family. So it seems to me that the right place to look for the sources of his writing is in the Sephardi Jewish culture. First, a first bet would obviously be the genre of the Ladino romance, but a second glance rules it out as a possible source, since being preserved by the women, it portrays mainly a dreamy and innocent romantic world, while the trilogy, even though it also portrays a world in which erotic magnetism has tremendous power, the author's attitude towards romance and erotic love is far from innocent. Rather, it is ironical. Where might this reduction of romantic ethos come from? Towards the end of the 14th century, there was a split within the Jewish community in Spain. A large number of Jews converted to Christianity in response to persecution by the Christians. They were called Marranos or New Christians, and it was indeed the best part of the Spanish Jewry. But since they were not accepted into the Spanish Christian society of the time, they stayed in excellent relations with the Jews. The Spanish believed that the Jews had a bad influence on them, and it was for this reason that the edict expelling all the Jews in 1492 was issued. So if there was such a strong influence of the Jews on the Marranos, we can assume that there was an even stronger influence of the Marranos, of whom there were twice as many at the time of the expulsion, and who, before their conversion, had been the elite of the Spanish Jewish society, on the remaining Jews, particularly in terms of language and culture. Since they, the Marranos, mediated to the relatively isolated Jewish communities the latest innovations in language, literature, music, and the Spanish of the Spanish cultural center. But we hardly need these historical documents since we have one Marrano work in which we can recognize the sources of the worldview embedded in Gurmezano's Goren Alexandrian trilogy, as well as a number of literary strategies its author uses. The work is the play La Celestina from 1499, written by the undergraduate law student Fernando de Rojas, about whom there is no doubt that he was a Marrano, the son of a Jewish parents who converted to Christianity. La Celestina is a highly valued play in Western literature. It is considered to be the first modern work of Spanish literature, and literary scholars even view it as the very first sample of the modern European play. Yirmiyahu Yovel, who used La Celestina to explain the Marrano sources of Spinoza's philosophical outlook, claimed that this work embodied the Marrano experience and worldview. Are the Marrano culture worldview and taste indeed are reflected in Gomezano-Goren's trilogy, where, first of all, reading La Celestina, whose author defined as a tragic comedy, explains the appearance of romantic love in the Alexandrian trilogy. In both the trilogy and La Celestina, we find not only the erotic love and desire are the driving forces behind the characters, but also that the attitude towards such love is ambivalent. In La Celestina, the love that the knight Callisto has for the honorable Melibea is described with heavy irony regarding the romantic notion of love. Like David's love to Ruby's sister in Alexandria's Summer, or Blanche's love for Gaston in Blanche of Gomezano-Goren, the love of Callisto to Melibea burns in a cold fire and is all about passion, seduction, and conquest. Their erotic encounter is described not as romantic, but as an obsessive gratification of sexual urges. The reductive appearance of this love, this romantic love in the play also derives from the fact that the character who symbolizes love in it is none other than an old prostitute, La Celestina. Surprisingly, there are several aspects of analogy between the main character in La Celestina, who earns a living shepherding other prostitutes, and the character of Blanche in the trilogy. First, a word about names. In both cases, the names are oxymoronic to the persona and the status of the characters bearing them. The name La Celestina, which means the heavenly one, is given to a character from the dregs of Spanish society of the day. Likewise, Gomezano-Goren's character Blanche has a name that contradicts her nature. Blanche in French means white or Snow White, whereas in the trilogy she appears as someone whose fair skin hides her moral degeneration. The similarity between Blanche and La Celestina continues in that they are both presented as pagan priestesses of earthly love. In La Celestina, the protagonist is treated as a pagan divinity and seems to be able to control the powers of the underworld. In an analogical way, in Alexandrian Summer, Blanche appears as a replica of Venus, the representative of Eros in the pantheon of the Roman gods. And she too, like La Celestina, seems to be able to commune with nature and to control its powers to a certain extent. At one point, the novel even suggests that Blanche, like La Celestina, is a pagan witch, driven by Eros and Tantalus, and possessed of tremendous powers. Though, for example, she injects poison into the veins of her lover's dying wife and seduces him to make love to her on her dead body. De Rojas uses a Callisto, Melibea, La Celestina triangle to claim that Catholic Christian culture has distorted the tremendous cosmic power of Eros, burdening it with a sense of sin, metaphorically turning it into an old prostitute. I doubt whether that is what Gumezano Goren wanted to say about Ladino culture, but the fact that 500 years later, after the Rojas, Gumezano defines erotic love using the same pagan thematic that the Rojas employed, even using similar literary strategies to do so, is quite surprising. However, the trilogy contains further evidence for the influence of the worldview embodied in La Celestina. The play is an anti-clerical satire. The female protagonist, La Celestina, the bordel owner and the former prostitute, is described as someone whose company is sought by Spain's social elite. The play emphasizes, in particular, the admiration that the clerical elite have for her. Instead of her, the sinner, kissing the hands of the high priests, it is they who kiss hers. The word depicted in the play is godless, a word with no transcendental content. It is a word that can be seen as the herald of the secular world of today, except that it still lacks the paradigm of the Enlightenment era as a substitute for the paradigm of God. A change that only took form some 150 years later in the writing of the post-Marrano Jewish Spanish philosopher Baruch Spinoza.
Rami, thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm in the middle. Hey,
okay. How much more?
You slept until now, maybe.
No, I'm.
Good morning.
You hypnotized me. How much more do you
Yeah,
got?
maybe.
All right, let's try to
Tell you when I finish. I will tell you. Okay, I will wake you up.
Because
I will wake you up
Paul Chagoel
when I finish. Okay.
We goofed on the time. Paul Chagoel has been. I don't want him in Salonika. I don't want him to fall asleep. Okay.
I was waiting patiently while other people did.
All right, you get 40 more minutes. Come on, let's make it fast. All right, yeah.
Let's make it good. No, let's make it.
No, it'll be superb. It's Mishubach. It's
the word portrayed in Gumezano Goren's trilogy is also devoid of God and religion. The trilogy reduction in the power of religion is highlighted in what Sarina, Ruby's grandmother, and the matriarchal ruler of Gumezano family has to say about the Copts. The Copts are the Egyptian ancient Christians. The Copts aren't Christians, she explains to Ruby. The Greeks are Christians. So what are the Copts? Asks young Ruby. Copts, replies the grandmother. In other words, it is the ethnic and cultural background that is important. Religious are not. Christianity cannot unite the Copts and the Greeks any more than it could unite the Jewish converts, the Marranos, and the Spanish Catholics in the generation following the conversion. La Celestina and the Alexandrian trilogy are also linked through the narrative and aesthetic strategies. As a play, La Celestina, of course, filled with masks and disguise. Callisto servants are always practicing hypocrisy and pretending, and La Celestina disguises herself as a pious woman. In the trilogy too, where there is a tendency toward theatrical style of staging scenes with a specially defined dimension of time and space, Gurmezano Goren allows plenty of room for masks and disguise. In Alexandrian Summer, El Tal'uni, the jockey, tries to impress his English patrons with a theatrical display of wild Bedouin riding, while Ruby dresses up as Nefertiti, the queen of pharaonic Egypt, in order to impress his aunts. In Alexandrian shores, Livia and her father Emilio steadily act out a scene which seems as if were taken from a Shakespearean play in front of Albert, who unwillingly finds himself drawn into a play as an extra. While in Blanche, the young Jews of Alexandria celebrate the New Year's Eve of 1947 with a fancy dress ball. Another aspect that links La Celestina and Gurmezano Goren's trilogy is the carnivalesque tendency to portray a socially inverted world. Those of low status are on top, and the exalted are fallen. Likewise, there is a tendency to focus on servant stock and gossip. The trilogy gives characters from the lowest level a prominent position. For example, Alexandrian Summer begins and ends with a vivid description of the family of the doorman of the Gurmezano's residence in Alexandria. The truth is that relative to Caliesto's servants in La Celestina, who seem smarter than their master, the doormen and the servants in Alexandrian Summer are portrayed with heart-rending realism. But once given an opportunity, even Salem, the servant of Gurmezano family, managed to trick his masters and squeeze some bakshish out of them in exchange for trivial information. I'd like to clarify at this point that I don't mean to claim that Gurmezano Goren was influenced directly and totally in his trilogy by the Renaissance play La Celestina. Perhaps he even hasn't read it at that time. But both this work are narrated through the same mindset, one that is post-clerical but pre-secular, and which are developed in Christian Spain among the Marranos and was mediated to, for the reasons cited above, to the Jews exiled from Spain. Support for this hypothesis also comes from another source. Out of the need to understand Spinoza's theory as a function of his Marrano legacy, Yirmiyahu Yovel lists several phenomena of which the situation of religious conversation introduced into the life of the convert. Surprisingly, all these phenomena, including living double life, having two separate life periods with two different names, making a consistent effort of hiding activities and thoughts from others, and the terrible fear of being informed on also appear as part of the formulation of the main characters in the trilogy. And you'll be glad now, because I'm coming to the end, to the conclusion, Itzhak. In conclusion, accumulative evidence indicates that Gurmezano-Goren's trilogy is a neo-Marano work that shares a mindset with the play La Celestina by the Marano playwright Fernando de Rojas. Moreover, its protagonists display characteristic considered to be Marano in nature. Thank you so much for your patience, and I'm sorry for the late hour.
No problem.
This is
right.
not my responsibility.
Rami, thank you.
Responsibility.
Okay, Rami, thank you very much. Wait, Vladimir, you want to say something? Do you want to ask a question? From Armenia, do you want to ask a question about a Turk from Egypt? No, okay.
No, but
Okay.
I want to say something about my production, my current production. I'm now busy with producing a film about the Holocaust in Greece, and the story that the film tells is about a group of Jews from the town of Volos, and Rabbi Pesach is one of my main characters in the film. So you heard about Rabbi Pesach and about his achievements and about him saving a lot of Jews during the Holocaust. So he will be one of my main characters in the film. It's like The Night of Fools. It will be a docudrama, meaning it will combine documentary with reenactments.
So I wish you a lot of success with that and the funding. You'll
Yes.
tell me where you
Yeah.
are, but that's not for public
On
notice.
November, we will know.
All right.
November, we will know what is going on.